We are deep diving into the intensely personal and, often counterintuitive lessons of entrepreneurial survival, drawn directly from the experiences of founder CEO Ben Horowitz.
We're talking about the part of the journey most management books just
Yeah.
skip. The collapse, the existential terror, the near-death experiences.
Right.
Our mission today is to unpack the struggle. We're focusing on what happens when that perfect plan meets, well, catastrophic reality.
And why, in what he calls wartime, the traditional rules of management don't just bend, they often break completely.
Our sources for this chronicle, Horowitz's just incredibly intense journey. We're talking the explosive rise of Netscape.
The near-fatal implosions and radical pivots of his next companies, LoudCloud and Opsware.
And then finally, the creation of a totally new kind of venture capital firm, Andreessen Horowitz, or as you probably know it, A16z.
So we're going to be extracting the concrete, often painful wisdom that's learned in the crucible of crisis. The goal is for you to walk away with insights for navigating your own impossible situations where, there is no recipe.
Let's unpack this.
We have to start with the core thesis. The idea that really differentiates this body of work from, I'd say, 90% of what's on the business shelf.
Which is?
The idea that there is no universal, repeatable recipe for building a high-tech company or for, leading a team out of deep trouble.
It's a fundamental challenge to the whole MBA mindset, isn't it? Most business literature, it sort of assumes a world where if you just follow steps 1 through 10, you're going to reach success.
Exactly. But Horowitz, he makes this crucial distinction between the easy things and the hard things.
Like setting up an organizational chart, defining a mission statement, hiring a CFO, that's the easy part. That's the recipe.
That's the recipe. The hard thing is getting the people within that structure to communicate honestly and effectively, especially when the company is failing and trust is just eroding.
The hard thing isn't setting a big, hairy, audacious goal. It's laying people off when you miss that goal.
Precisely. And that kind of complexity, it requires advice and experience because formulas, they just do not apply to these messy, dynamic, high-stakes situations.
And the complexity, it leads right into this profound psychological state he calls the struggle.
Yes.
And this is far beyond just having a tough quarter or, working late nights.
No, that's an existential crisis. The struggle is that abyss a founder faces when the early dreams, they turn into nightmares.
It's when that self-doubt starts to morph into actual self-hatred, when you look at yourself in the mirror and you genuinely wonder why you even started the company.
And whether you should even be the CEO anymore.
The source material details the really brutal emotional and physical toll this takes. The struggle is, waking up every single morning in a cold sweat.
It's when you physically notice that food has lost its taste.
Yeah.
It's that feeling of being profoundly in over your head, and yet the company, the customers, all those employees, they're relying entirely on you.
And you can't be replaced, even though you desperately wish you could be.
And crucially, this psychological foundation, it impacts how all the decisions are made, particularly when you're dealing with the relentless pressure of probability.
Right. He touches on a key distinction here, borrowing from the philosophy of Peter Thiel, I believe.
That's right. The contrast between a determinate world, which is ruled by calculus, and an indeterminate world ruled by statistics.
Calculus is the world of precision, right? If you're a physicist sending a probe to Mars, the calculations are deterministic. You run the formula right, you hit the target.
But the startup world, that indeterminate world, it seems totally ruled by statistics, by bell curves and random walks. The odds are always, always against you.
I mean, what is it? 9 in 10 startups fail.
And this is where the critical lesson learned during that near-impossible LoudCloud IPO process comes in. A startup CEO simply cannot play the odds.
If you look at the statistics, if you decide based on that bell curve, you'll almost certainly quit because the probability of success is usually just terrible.
And that is the profound defiance of it all. The chance might be 9 in 10 that you fail, or 1 in 1,000 that you succeed.
But the CEO's task remains absolutely the same.
Find the answer. You have to keep playing. It's a refusal to accept the deterministic logic of statistics when everyone else is just measuring your likelihood of survival.
It's an act of will, really.
It is. And the skill that truly distinguishes a successful CEO in a crisis is that singular ability to just clear away the noise, ignore the probabilities.
And make the best possible strategic move when it feels like there are no good moves left to make on the board.
You're basically fighting against the statistical universe with pure, focused intent.
And that defiance, it often stems from a very particular set of formative experiences. To really understand the leader who emerges from the struggle, we have to look back at the foundation that shaped his thinking.
It's a fascinating backstory.
Horowitz had a surprisingly non-traditional beginning, starting with his family background in the place he jokingly calls the People's Republic of Berkeley.
Yeah, this was not your typical button-down corporate upbringing, not at all.
His roots are deep in the far left.
Oh yeah. His grandparents were card-carrying communists, and his grandfather was actually blacklisted and lost his job as a school teacher during the McCarthy era.
Wow.
And his father, who he calls a red diaper baby, moved the family to Berkeley, where he edited the famed New Left magazine Ramparts. So this environment, it gave him a perspective rooted in social justice and struggle, which is very different from the typical Silicon Valley narrative.
And this unique childhood provides us with the first foundational lesson, dealing with fear. The source recounts an anecdote from when he was just 7 years old, involving a dare from an older, scary kid named Roger.
It's a perfect microcosm of managing internal panic. This kid, Roger, who just terrified him, dared him to walk 30 yards, which he said felt like miles, and demand a red wagon from another boy, Joel Clark Jr.
And he was told to use a racist slur that he didn't even understand at the time.
Right. So he was paralyzed by the fear of Roger, but also terrified of this social confrontation.
He describes himself walking those 30 yards, heart-pounding, just utterly consumed by fear. But when he finally got to Joel, something shifted.
The fear of the confrontation was replaced by this small flicker of human decency and curiosity. Instead of following Roger's horrific instruction, he just asked a simple question.
Can I ride in your wagon?
And Joel said, sure. Roger, having lost his spectacle, immediately disappeared.
And the outcome was that Joel Clark Jr. became his best friend for life.
The profound lesson there wasn't about the wagon. It was about recognizing that the path to overcoming one fear, in this case, fear of social confrontation, often involves stepping through it and finding a human connection, rather than relying on the script of confrontation you were given.
This ability to handle fear was tested again in high school football. I mean, despite being more of an academic kid, he joined the Berkeley High team.
Where he quickly learned that dealing with fear was, like, 75% of the game.
And that football experience provided a pivotal leadership lesson from his head coach, Chico Mendoza.
Coach Mendoza delivered a speech that Horowitz remembers as the most intense, hilarious, and utterly poetic motivational speech he'd ever heard. And it was centered on a single, unforgettable concept.
Uncompromising seriousness and accountability.
Turn your shit in.
And what did that mean exactly?
It meant that if you were late, if you didn't want to hit the tackling dummies, if you were walking on the freshly painted grass where you're supposed to run, whatever it was, if you weren't fully committed to the mission.
You had to turn your stuff in.
Exactly. Your pads, your helmet, everything.
Yeah.
And leave the team.
Yeah.
It just hammered home this lesson that you must be serious about the mission, without exception, and accountability is absolute.
And that philosophy of uncompromising seriousness became central to how he ran companies later on. That demand for absolute focus.
But we see that focus challenged severely as he entered his early professional life at a company called NetLabs.
The company was poorly run, but at the same time, he was facing this immense personal crisis. His second daughter, Mariah, was diagnosed with autism.
The strain on his family life was just immense. He was trying to be the perfect engineer, the perfect employee, and the perfect father all at once. It wasn't working.
And there's this one story. He was sitting with his father in 105-degree heat, exhausted, while his 3 children are crying uncontrollably in the backseat of the car.
And his father, just observing this sheer depletion, shared a joke that was devastatingly serious.
He said, "Son, do you know what's cheap? Flowers. Flowers are really cheap."
But do you know what's expensive? Divorce.
And that moment was the profound revelation for him.
He realized he had prioritized himself and his career first, operating under this illusion of unlimited personal bandwidth. And in doing so, he was risking losing his family completely.
He had to stop trying to be the boy who could do everything and become the man who could make the hard choices.
He quit NetLabs the very next day, made a conscious decision to stabilize his home life by taking a job at a more established, less consuming company, Lotus Development.
And that difficult decision to put his family first directly led to the next massive professional pivot.
While he was at Lotus, he encountered a new graphical browser called Mosaic. And in that moment, he realized everything he was working on was, well, meaningless.
It was an instant, unavoidable realization, wasn't it? The internet was the future. It was the inevitable force.
And he needed to be a part of building that infrastructure. This conviction is what drove his move to Netscape, which was co-founded by Jim Clark and this brilliant young inventor, Marc Andreessen.
What's so fascinating about the Netscape workthrough is that it succeeded by betting against the incumbents. I mean, you had figures like Bill Gates and Larry Ellison banking on these proprietary information superhighways.
Walled gardens, basically, that would tax every transaction.
Right. But Netscape, fueled by the vision of a 22-year-old Andreessen, decided to make the open internet the future.
They didn't just create a browser. They innovated at this incredible pace, inventing key technologies like SSL to make the browser secure for commerce.
Horowitz recalls interviewing with Andreessen and realizing instantly he was talking to potentially the smartest person he had ever met, someone who just saw 3 moves ahead of everyone else.
And that vision was validated in the most spectacular way. The Netscape IPO in August 1995 was just a world-shaking event.
The stock was priced at $14, then they doubled it to $28 in a last-minute decision.
And it still spiked to $75 on the day of the launch. It gave the 16-month-old company a market value of nearly $3 billion.
It basically defined the start of the new economy, and it set the stage for the massive war that was about to follow.
That euphoria did not last. The new economy was barely months old before Netscape faced the existential threat that nearly wiped it off the map. Microsoft.
And this was the first true crack in the armor, and it was a strategic, multi-pronged attack. First, Microsoft announced they would bundle Internet Explorer for free with Windows 95.
Which immediately undercut Netscape's primary revenue stream from browser sales.
And second, and this was maybe even worse, Microsoft's web server, IZ, was 5 times faster than Netscape's secure server.
Which was supposed to be their pivot point for enterprise revenue. It was a disaster.
Horowitz calculated they had maybe 5 months to solve this problem before the company was truly toast.
So they needed an immediate high-stakes tactical response, which was spearheaded by a guy named Mike Homer, whom Horowitz describes as the ultimate warrior, someone who actually seemed to thrive the worse the situation got.
And they developed what they knew had to be a lead bullet strategy, which we'll define more fully later, but it essentially meant fighting the war head-on.
No fancy pivots. They decided to offer a dirt-cheap, open alternative to Microsoft Back Office, which was just dominating the enterprise infrastructure market at the time.
This involved immense effort. They acquired 2 key companies and secured this landmark deal with Informix to provide relational database access for only $50 a copy.
Which was hundreds of times cheaper than what Microsoft charged. They assembled the whole package, called it Netscape Sweet Spot, and it was designed to fight the proprietary giants at a fraction of the cost.
But the volatility wasn't just external, it was internal too. This high-stakes environment produced the famous anecdote about that infamous, brutal, and profane email from Marc Andreessen.
The shock was just immense. Horowitz receives this utterly brutal email full of demands and profanity, demanding the head of enterprise sales do the fucking interview yourself to secure a necessary piece of press.
And this arrives on the very same day that Andreessen was featured, barefoot, on the cover of Time magazine as the golden boy of the internet.
The juxtaposition was just jarring. Here's the public face of success and vision, and simultaneously he's sending a message that suggested everything was on the brink of collapse internally.
Horowitz was so shaken by it, worrying about his job, that he showed the email and the magazine cover to his wife, Felicia,
who suggested he immediately update his resume.
But here's the critical insight from that story. The relationship not only survived that high-tension exchange, it thrived.
Over the next 2 years, the server business grew to a substantial $400 million a year. The key was that they challenged each other to the point of being productive.
They could be brutal with each other's ideas and strategies because there was this deep underlying trust and a shared commitment to the mission. They weren't fighting each other.
They were fighting Microsoft.
The Netscape war eventually ended with the sale to AOL in 1998. Horowitz and Andreessen, they felt AOL was primarily focused on media, not technology, so they started planning their next venture.
And the inspiration for their next company, LoudCloud, came from witnessing the chaos of internet scaling.
Right. Every time an AOL e-commerce partner was connected, their site would just crash because they couldn't handle the scaling, the security, or the disaster recovery.
Deployment was complicated, inconsistent, and often done manually. It was a mess.
So their insight was to build the first true concept of the computing cloud, a centralized, automated, smart cloud that handled all of that: security, scaling, disaster recovery.
The developer could just focus on the code, and the cloud would handle the complexity of deployment. I mean, this was truly visionary for 1999.
LoudCloud, riding the peak of the late 90s boom, grew at a frenetic, almost unbelievable pace.
They were hiring 30 employees a month, moving into these new, expensive offices they called the Taj. The company was immediately billed as Mark Andreessen's second coming.
And then the catastrophic collapse.
The Nasdaq peaked on March 10th, 2000, and immediately began its dizzying, terrifying plummet.
LoudCloud went from being the hottest startup in Silicon Valley, valued at $700 million pre-money in its Series C, to being functionally unfundable within 6 months.
This, as he describes it, is the brutal transition between the two true emotions of a startup, euphoria and terror.
And the terror was justified. They had dramatically missed their quarterly sales forecast, only $37 million in bookings versus the $100 million they had forecasted.
Because the bottom of the dot-com market had just completely dropped out.
And with only 6 weeks of cash remaining, the dire, desperate decision was made.
They had to go public, regardless of the market.
The roadshow for that IPO was a study in impossible tension. While Horowitz was out pitching skeptical investors to save the entire company, his wife, Felicia, suffered a near-fatal allergic reaction to medication and stopped breathing.
The emotional toll of this moment is just. It's central to understanding this struggle. Horowitz called home, ready to quit the roadshow immediately and fly back, fulfilling his commitment to his family.
His father-in-law assured him Felicia was okay now, though he did note she'd been nearly dead the day before.
And when Horowitz finally spoke to Felicia, the instructions she gave him revealed the profound, sacrificial nature of the founder's struggle.
She looked at the stakes and told him, "Get the IPO done. There is no tomorrow for you and the company. I'll be fine."
That instruction forced him to stumble through the rest of the roadshow completely discombobulated, pitching a $10 share price that he knew was already double the current market benchmark for comparable companies.
The fact that the IPO eventually priced at a lowered $6 a share, managing to raise just enough capital to survive, is less a sign of genius and more a sign of sheer unrelenting will forged in personal crisis.
The IPO saved them, but survival was relative. The stock plummeted further to $2 and eventually hit 35 cents a share after a subsequent sale.
This is the pit. This is where the CEO's psychology becomes the single most important asset the company has.
And when Horowitz felt dead, as he put it, he sought out Bill Campbell, the legendary mentor and coach.
And Campbell didn't offer the usual VC optimism, did he?
Not at all. He confirmed the odds were near nil. But Campbell's crucial role was ensuring the CEO didn't quit. He just kept reminding Horowitz, your job is still to find the answer. You are paid to make a decision when the data suggests no decision is possible.
And the breakthrough came from this moment of cognitive distance, asking a hypothetical question.
What would I do if we went bankrupt?
And the answer was clear. He'd buy the company's internal automation software, Opsware, out of bankruptcy and start a new, focused software company.
Which led directly to the survival strategy, spinning out Opsware as a pure software play without having to go bankrupt first.
Campbell, in describing their dwindling cash balance and loss of customer confidence, used the analogy of a spiral.
And the solution had to be drastic. Selling the entire LoudCloud services business, all customers, all revenue to EDS to save the core software company, Opsware.
This was a colossal, high-stakes negotiation. And to force a deal through quickly, they employed a high-pressure tactic borrowed from the Hollywood agent Michael Ovitz.
The artificial deadline.
Right.
They actually consulted Ovitz, who told them he absolutely believed in artificial deadlines. He used them to create leverage, play one bidder, in this case IBM, against the other, EDS, and do everything short of illegal or immoral to get the deal done.
And they used this advice to force both major bidders to submit final, non-negotiable bids within 8 weeks.
The tactic worked. They secured the sale to EDS and saved Opsware.
But the survival was short-lived. Opsware immediately plunged into a second, arguably worse crisis.
The 60 days to live.
Their largest customer, EDS, which accounted for a devastating 90% of Opsware's revenue, wanted to cancel the contract.
The problem was pure chaos. EDS had inherited these insane and chaotic environments from every customer they had ever signed, running ancient, incompatible operating systems.
And Opsware's software just wouldn't run correctly in that environment.
Losing that contract meant instant death, so Horowitz assigned a two-pronged strategy to save it.
Jason Rosenthal was put in charge of relentless precision-making, sure the technology worked flawlessly. But Anthony Wright was tasked with something different.
Finding the exciting value, something EDS didn't expect but desperately wanted.
And Anthony delivered what they called the Tangram breakthrough. Through deep investigation, He discovered that the key contact at EDS, a guy named Frank Johnson, hated that the purchasing department was forcing him to switch from his existing beloved inventory product, which was called Tangram Enterprise Solutions.
Anthony realized if Opsware could solve Frank's problem, they'd save the company.
And the action they took was shocking. It just demonstrates the lengths required for survival.
Opsware acquired the publicly traded Tangram for $10 million in cash and stock, even though its market capitalization was only $6 million at the time.
And they immediately gave the software to EDS for free.
They spent $10 million to solve one manager's pain point, and in doing so, saved the $20 million a year contract and the entire Opsware entity.
That dramatic solution really embodies the philosophy of using lead bullets, not silver bullets.
The silver bullet fallacy is that temptation to look for an easy fix, a pivot, or a lightweight product solution to avoid fighting the tough battle head on.
And this is psychologically difficult to choose because the silver bullet promises quick relief. Horowitz learned this at Netscape when their product was 5 times slower than Microsoft's.
No clever marketing or a simple pivot was going to fix that. It required lead bullets, months of grueling, rugged engineering work, fixing fundamental performance issues. It was slow, painful, and unglamorous.
They applied the same lesson at Opsware when they were losing battles to a superior competitor, BladeLogic.
Instead of pivoting or acquiring some cheaper, simpler architecture, they committed to building a fundamentally better product over 9 months of grinding engineering.
And that unrelenting commitment to fixing the core problem eventually allowed them to reverse market share and increase the company's value 20-fold.
It all comes down to focusing relentlessly on the task at hand, regardless of the odds or the misery. It really echoes this great piece of advice Horowitz heard from the Raiders owner Al Davis, quoting Coach Bill Parcells.
This was when Parcells was struggling with injuries and poor performance on his team.
And Davis just told him, Bill, nobody cares, just coach your team.
That is the ultimate wartime lesson. When things go wrong, excuses, no matter how valid, like the dot-com collapse or the Microsoft threat, they won't preserve $1 for investors or save an employee's job.
So the CEO has to discard all that mental energy spent on rationalizing and just focus every single ounce of will on finding the seemingly impossible way out.
Okay, so moving from the survival tactics to the internal operations, a massive portion of Horowitz's wisdom runs directly counter to the conventional management playbook.
It really does.
And the first of these counterintuitive lessons is radical transparency. CEOs should tell it like it is, especially when things are bad.
The mistake of the young CEO is what he calls the positivity delusion, projecting an overly positive, sunny demeanor to keep morale up and prevent panic.
And he realized he was committing this error during a conversation with his brother-in-law, who was an AT&T lineman.
The lineman complained about executives who would blow a little sunshine up my ass, acting like everything was fine when the workers on the ground knew the reality was far more trouble.
And Horowitz realized he was doing the same thing. He thought he was protecting his team, but the team perceived it as either lying or profound ignorance.
He was underestimating their resilience and overestimating their fragility.
There are 3 imperative reasons he gives for this radical transparency. First is trust. The required amount of communication is inversely proportional to the level of trust.
Meaning, if employees fundamentally trust the CEO because he always tells the absolute truth, even if it's painful, communication becomes vastly more efficient.
Second, utilizing more brains on the problem is always better, especially when you're facing existential threats.
It's the concept behind the open source community's maxim, given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow.
It's just a profound waste to hire incredibly smart people and then withhold the biggest, most critical, most existential problems from them. You're preventing them from contributing to the solution.
And the third reason is culture. Horowitz defines a healthy corporate culture using an analogy often used in networking. It should function like the RIP routing protocol.
Which means?
That protocol ensures that bad news travels fast and wide across the network. A healthy culture has to reward, not punish people for bringing bad news out into the open. If employees know about fatal issues but the culture discourages them from sharing, the company's doomed.
This transparency is absolutely non-negotiable when you're making the most painful decisions, like laying people off.
The VC, Doug Leon, admitted that he would always bet against a company that survived multiple consecutive layoffs because the process inevitably breaks the culture and trust.
So to mitigate this cultural damage, the CEO has to adhere to some key rules. First, they have to admit failure.
Managers must state clearly that the layoff is due to company failure, a missed plan, a strategic error, not individual performance.
And the message has to be primarily for the people who are staying, who are watching how their colleagues are treated and determining their own future loyalty.
The process demands respect. Managers must lay off their own people because they know their staff best. The CEO has to address the entire company beforehand to set the context honestly.
And most crucially, the CEO must be visible and present afterward, helping people carry boxes to their cars, speaking to them, demonstrating genuine care and accountability for the failure.
Firing an executive requires a similar level of painful honesty, but it has to be coupled with meticulous root cause analysis.
And Horowitz stresses a crucial insight here. An executive firing is usually a system failure, a breakdown in the interview or the integration process, not just an executive failure.
So the CEO has to perform a detailed post-mortem. Was the position poorly defined? Did we hire for a lack of weakness rather than for a critical strength, which often leads to a mediocre hire when you needed greatness?
Did we hire for scale too soon, or did we just fail to integrate them into the existing organizational culture?
There's also the special case of scaling, which isn't really a failure but more a natural evolution. When a company quadruples in size, management jobs fundamentally change.
The executive hired to manage a 50-person team is now running a 200-person organization. The job becomes brand new, and the executive needs to requalify for it.
And when handling the departure, Bill Campbell offered this vital piece of advice. You cannot let him keep his job, but you absolutely can let him keep his respect.
Meaning the CEO should allow the executive to decide how the news is communicated internally. It preserves their dignity and professional reputation, and it ensures the company takes accountability for its part in the systemic failure.
Finally, in this section, we need to distinguish clearly between the two types of ambition that drive people in a company.
Ambition for the company, which operates through the team prism, versus ambition for oneself, which operates through the personal prism.
Team-focused people, they naturally deflect credit. They focus obsessively on the game plan for the company's success, and they take full responsibility for past failures, openly detailing their own misjudgments.
Personally ambitious people, by contrast, take sole credit for achievements and spend a disproportionate amount of time questioning their own compensation or demanding promotions.
The Mark Cranny anecdote perfectly illustrates why hiring for team ambition matters most in a crisis. Cranny was a square, intense, non-traditional sales savant who was hired as head of sales despite the staff voting him down.
So why did he get the job?
The staff cited his abundance of weakness. He made people uncomfortable. He didn't fit the stereotypical Silicon Valley sales leader mold. But Horowitz saw his strength. Cranny was relentlessly focused on the team.
When he was interviewed, he bristled at questions about his personal accomplishments.
But instead, relentlessly questioned the company's specific tactical game plan for winning deals against named competitors. He was all about the team.
He was a wartime general necessary for survival. And it proves that leadership should be hired for critical strength, even if that strength comes bundled with peripheral weaknesses that don't fit the corporate stereotype.
You have to optimize for the strength required for the mission, not for the lack of weakness.
As Opsware scaled, the focus shifted from pure survival to process and culture. And here, too, Horowitz's lessons prioritize clarity over comfort, beginning with the somewhat humorous case of the profanity policy.
Right. Staff complained that the amount of profanity, and it was primarily coming from the CEO and other engineers, made the environment unprofessional and potentially hostile.
So Horowitz realized he had a clear organizational choice. Either ban profanity and risk limiting the top talent pool, since many top engineers came from highly profane, results-driven environments like Intel and Microsoft.
Or accept it. And he chose to accept it, prioritizing the availability of top talent.
But this decision required immediate and absolute clarity. They could not tolerate profanity used for intimidation or sexual harassment. Ambiguity was not an option.
Which led to the famous cupcake speech given at an all-company meeting.
To define the boundary clearly, he used a strange but memorable movie reference. He stated that it was fine to say to a colleague, "Those cupcakes you baked look delicious."
But he clarified the unacceptable boundary. It is not okay for me to say to Anthony, "Hey, cupcakes, you look mighty fine in them jeans."
The lesson wasn't about the cursing itself. It was that sometimes an organization doesn't need a complex or difficult solution. It just needs clarity.
Once the boundaries were clearly defined, that cursing was permissible, so long as it was directed at an inanimate object or an idea and never used to intimidate or harass another person, the complaint stopped entirely.
Another key element of scaling that many startups neglect is training.
It's a common mistake, this belief that smart people, like engineers, don't need training. As if McDonald's trains its burger flippers. But a Stanford-educated software architect doesn't need any guidance.
It's just not true.
And training is essential for three profound reasons. First, functional efficiency. It standardizes performance and ensures everyone knows the definition of a good job. Horowitz developed the Good Product Manager, Bad Product Manager memo at Netscape, which instantly improved his team's performance by providing clear behavioral definitions of success and failure.
Second, training drastically reduces management overhead. If you don't train people, managers spend 80% of their time constantly answering the same basic questions and solving predictable, repetitive problems.
Training solves the problem upstream. It frees managers to focus on unique, high-value tasks.
And third, and this is perhaps most critical for a growth company, training improves employee retention.
Exit interviews consistently reveal that employees primarily quit for two reasons. They hated their manager, usually due to a lack of guidance, or they weren't learning anything, meaning the company wasn't investing in their future. Mandatory training addresses both.
And the implementation must be non-negotiable. Horowitz suggests enforcing training by withholding new employee requisitions, the to be hired or TBH headcount, until managers develop and implement a mandatory high-quality training program.
It has to be built into the core operating rhythm of the company.
Neglecting this foundational work leads directly to what Horowitz terms management debt.
Just like technical debt writing, quick, dirty code that you eventually have to pay back with interest in the form of bugs and slowdowns. Cutting management corners incurs interest in culture, morale, and political conflict.
We can look at two classic examples of this debt. One is putting two in the box, which is keeping two executives in one position because the CEO is afraid of making a tough choice between them.
It's tempting in the short term. It buys you time. But the interest is paid back in full. It ultimately confuses the entire organization, who is the ultimate decision maker.
It leads to political infighting, wasted energy, and eventually the necessity of firing both executives to restore clarity. It costs far more in severance, morale, and time than if the hard decision had been made immediately.
The second, equally corrosive example is overcompensating a key employee who threatens to quit after receiving a competing offer. You pay her significantly more than your best engineers to prevent her from leaving.
And that debt comes due quickly. Every other employee in the company learns that the only way to get a substantial raise or promotion is to generate an external offer and use it as a threat.
You save the project in the short term, but you've compromised your entire compensation system and shattered cultural fairness long term.
Ultimately, the focus of all this effort should be on making the company a good place to work. Horowitz cites Jim Barksdale's maxim from Netscape.
We take care of the people, the products, and the profits in that order.
Horowitz's core belief is that being a good company doesn't matter all that much when things are going well and the stock is soaring.
But when things inevitably go wrong, that cultural capital, the belief that the company cares about you, is the difference between life and death.
The classic illustration of this is the Jigo Corporation example. Jigo was a massive financial failure. It lost nearly all its capital.
Yet employees refer to it as the best work experience of their lives. That proved that management quality, the sense of mission, and the caring culture are the essential factors that keep people motivated, even when financial prospects completely disappear.
To maintain this culture, the CEO's most important operational responsibility is designing the communication architecture, the org charts, the processes, the meetings.
And the most important time-tested vehicle for essential information flow is the one-on-one meeting.
The key to a good one-on-one is understanding that it is the employee's meeting, not the manager's.
It's the designated mechanism for introverted employees who might not speak up in a large meeting, to share half-formed ideas, pressing issues, or even personal life struggles that don't fit into formal status reports.
The manager's job, therefore, is to shut up and listen. They have to use effective, open-ended questions designed to draw out the truth.
Questions like, if you were me, what changes would you make? And what's not fun about working here? They force the employee to think beyond their immediate job description and bring the real, systemic problems to the surface.
After surviving all the struggles and successfully navigating Opsware through years of war, rebuilding it into a formidable software company, the eventual decision to sell was strategically necessary, but intensely emotional.
The company had been successfully rebuilt. It was hitting a $150 million revenue run rate, trading at $6 to $8 per share. But the landscape kept changing.
Virtualization was rising, changing data centers entirely.
And Opsware realized they had to redefine their market. They needed to win the broader systems and network management space, which meant simultaneously beating both BMC and BladeLogic. It was a colossal existential war with significantly higher stakes than any they had faced before.
And Horowitz describes the immense emotional complexity of deciding to sell his dream, the thing he had nearly died for, twice. I mean, how do you sell out your dream?
The solution was twofold. Strategically, they were selling from a position of strength, making a proactive choice about the next inevitable market war.
And emotionally, he had to mute the feelings by ensuring he was paid a market salary before the sale to remove that personal financial pressure that might tempt him to reject the sale out of desperation.
HP eventually offered $14.25 per share, totaling $1.65 billion in cash.
Once that chapter was closed, he reflected on his struggles and all the awful advice he received, like the VC asking, when are you going to get a real CEO?
And this was the catalyst for founding Andreessen Horowitz, or A16Z.
He realized that while the best entrepreneurs' jobs, Bezos, Zuckerberg were founders, the traditional VC ecosystem was fundamentally designed to replace them with professional managers as soon as the company scaled.
Instead of helping them grow into the job.
So the mission of A16s was to create a firm specifically designed to help technical founders run their own companies by closing two critical gaps. The first was the CEO skill set.
He knew you couldn't teach an NFL quarterback in a classroom, but you could accelerate their learning curve by providing field-tested mentorship and wisdom.
The second was the CEO network. Professional CEOs had these established, deep connections to executives, customers, partners, the press. Technical founders typically only knew other engineers.
So A16s aimed to systematize and professionalize this network access through a massive platform team dedicated to connecting the founders to the people they needed to succeed.
They took the operating model directly from Michael Ovitz's Creative Artists Agency, CAA.
The agency was designed to shift the industry's economic power from the studios to the talent. A16Z's was designed to shift the power from the VCs back to the talented entrepreneur.
And they adopted the nickname A16Z to solve the problem of nobody being able to spell or say Andreessen Horowitz.
It's a programmer's inside joke, mimicking the I-18N Programming Internationalization Shortening Convention, where you keep the first letter and the last letter of a long word and count the number of letters in between.
So A, 16 letters, Z.
It immediately signaled to technical founders that this was a VC firm built by people who understood their world.
And this brings us to the final and most crucial lesson learned. Embrace the struggle.
Horowitz jokes that during the struggle, he was constantly criticized and called everything but a child of God, but after the sale, he was immediately considered a management guru.
The difference was freedom. As CEO, unrelenting confidence was necessary. Public shareholders could never see weakness.
But as a VC, he had the freedom to share his weaknesses, his fears, and his controversial opinions. The very things that hold the clues to dealing with the hard things, because hard things have no easy answers or simple, confident narratives.
He realized that success came not from trying to fit a mold, but from embracing his own background, his weirdness, and his unique instincts.
From applying Coach Mendoza's poetic, intense demand for accountability to using his specific understanding of human weakness to pull off the Tangram deal.
The ultimate lesson, inscribed on his grandfather's tombstone, borrowed from the philosopher Karl Marx, is profound and simple.
Life is struggle. That is the enduring truth of entrepreneurship.
So let's recap the key non-intuitive takeaways for you, the learner, from this deep dive into the entrepreneurial crucible.
First, abandon the search for the recipe. When crisis hits, you have to embrace radical transparency. Tell it like it is to build necessary trust and bring the maximum number of smart brains onto your existential problems.
Second, forget the silver bullets. Don't look for an easy pivot or a shortcut to avoid the fight. Commit instead to using lead bullets. Relentless, hard work fixing the core, fundamental problem that threatens the business, regardless of how painful, slow, or unglamorous that work may be.
Third, acknowledge that the job of a CEO in crisis demands courage over intelligence. You have to find the strength to make the hard decision when statistics give you near impossible odds and everyone you trust tells you that you are wrong.
And finally, take care of the people first. Build a company that is fundamentally a good place to work, because when things inevitably go wrong, that cultural capital, that loyalty and trust, is the only thing that keeps your team fighting alongside you when the cash runs low.
We've seen in these war stories that the greatest leaders are often forged in the crucible of chaos, not peace, and the techniques that save a company are frequently the violation of standard textbook management practices.
This begs the question for you, the learner. In your own struggle, whether building a product, fixing an operation, or leading a team through a downturn, do you have the courage not just to make the right decision, but to make the right decision when every piece of data and every person you trust tells you it is wrong? What management rule are you currently following that you know deep down must be broken for you and your mission to survive?